Now, the legal pressure on Dr. Anthony Fauci is growing. We just gave you the story about him being photographed outside of his DC home. He looked absolutely perplexed, and his wife actually gave the camera a bird. That is not the kind that you want to see. It is definitely not a natural thing for someone to do, and neither are the activities that the former NIAID doctor was up to when he was running the COVID pandemic response and in the years before. Now, Dr. Anthony Fauci is definitely feeling the heat from Senate investigators who have a copy of his phone, and there is definitely some alarming signs that this is not the entire picture of what he was doing and who he was calling during his time as a public official. And Fauci, of course, had contacts all over the media and with other scientists. We have his so-called diary, which was a stark revelation of his megalomania and his self-absorption. He didn't seem to be so much about the science as the publicity. And it's very interesting to see that this figure who was networking in the media with everyone from actresses like Julia Roberts to media figures like Andrea Mitchell, and they are definitely not the complete picture. He had only 3 contacts on his phone that was issued to him by the HHS. And he seemed to have been very cautious about who he was contacting on his government-issued phone. Probably pretty wise. But more revealing than this is that it appears that one of his assistants deleted, quote, tons, unquote, of emails belonging to Fauci. And so there's some major questions about what he was doing in the years between 2014 and his retirement in the year before Trump came to office. So this is something that is very revealing because he was a guarded figure. He was meeting with the CIA behind closed doors and off the books, and he was very cautious about what he was saying. So we have to have some suspicion about his so-called diary and what he was writing in it. It doesn't tell us the whole story, I'm fairly certain. And the phone is definitely a lead in all of this that suggests that among the 34,000 texts that are being reviewed by Ron Johnson, the senator, well, there are going to be some signs that he is not giving us the entire story. Now, the Senate testimony that he just recently gave also goes to that point. He pled the fifth 111 times despite a pardon that was issued by former President Joe Biden, or more accurately, his auto pen. It was going back to 2014. Now, interestingly enough, Senator Rand Paul explained why 2014 in a clip that we just reviewed. And the upshot of all of this is that's when the gain of function research happened at Wuhan.
1 million Americans died, and I think they deserve to know the truth. Anthony Fauci has advocated for dangerous gain of function research for 2 decades now. The question why is not a question that he can have liability for. He was given a pardon. Interestingly, the pardon starts in 2014. That's when the funding of the lab in Wuhan started. So I think he should answer questions. As far as pleading the fifth when you have a pardon, all you have to do is tell the truth, just not commit a new crime. But if we were to grant him immunity from telling the truth, of what value, would his testimony be?
Now, there you have it. This could be a major clue about what Fauci was doing. And his phone, the records go back to 2014 as well, as Ron Johnson said. So we'll keep you posted about all of this. Again, he has been referred to the DOJ for contempt of Congress charges. That potentially has a jail sentence of up to a year, but we'll all believe it when we see it. We definitely need accountability over this because the longer we go without the scientific community that engaged in egregious manipulation of data and misleading the public, those people who are responsible for that, they need to be held accountable in a court of law, of course with due process, but if they're found guilty, they need to be punished for it. And so this contempt of Congress charge against Fauci is just the tip of the iceberg.
Senator, grateful to you for joining.
Glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I want to spend a lot of the time talking through the story you're trying to allow the country to understand and history to understand about Anthony Fauci. But let's talk about it today. There's neither of us are lawyers, but we both know there are a lot of legal questions here about what happens next. What's your most optimistic case about what the committee did today? Where could it lead and when to try to get compliance from Dr. Fauci?
My goal all along is to get the truth out. 1 million Americans died in the pandemic, and I'd like to know why we funded dangerous research in China. There's not really any liability attached to that question. Anthony Fauci's opinion on why he funded this research, he can have a different opinion on whether it was dangerous or not. He can have an opinion about, whether or not they're opaque in China, whether or not they've been honest with us, whether the investigation was accurate. But his opinion shouldn't really attach any liability to it. That's what I've been mostly concerned about. And really, it didn't start in 2020. His advocacy for gain of function research goes back to about 2010 when he funded research in the Netherlands. And a researcher by the name of Ron Fauci took the bird flu and gave it 8-point mutations and made it more infectious between mammals. See, right now, the one thing that saves us from a disaster with bird flu is that it's an animal virus, goes very easily from chicken to chicken, from bird to bird, occasionally comes to humans, but does not transmit human to human. So to my mind, experimenting to try to make the bird flu more transmissible human to human is a death wish. I think it's akin to monkeying around with plutonium. I mean, it's really, really dangerous. And this is a debate we should have in our country, but it was mostly decided by Anthony Fauci. For his 40 some odd years, he would make these decisions, and many, many scientists disagreed with him. This is the kind of fulsome debate we should have. And so the contempt citation is because he's unwilling, even though he ran these agencies for 40 years, he's unwilling to have a fulsome discussion over this.
I'm going to walk through the chronology with you, starting with gain of function. But what did the lawyers in the committee tell you, or the Senate lawyers tell you? How quickly could this act the committee took today to find him in contempt, how quickly could that yield something productive?
Right. We have hand carried it over to the Attorney General today and also to the U.S. Attorney in D.C. Ultimately, if there were proceedings over contempt of court, it would be the U.S. Attorney in D.C. But I'm guessing, since this is very high profile, probably there'd be a discussion with the Attorney General. So it's in their ball, it's in their playground now. I mean, it's up to them to make the decision on whether or not they pursue this. There's not a whole lot of law with regard to this, but there was a Supreme Court case in the 1890s that said that if you had been given immunity through a pardon, that the Fifth Amendment didn't apply. Because the Fifth Amendment is a protection against self-incrimination. But if you've been given immunity, at least the Supreme Court in that case made that decision. The courts will have to decide whether that's applicable to the current situation. But I guess my concern, because I won't be part of the legal battle, is teeing it up for those who will to determine whether or not it's something they can pursue. And really, one outcome isn't necessarily that he goes to jail, that he's forced to testify. That he would come back and testify and we get these answers.
Would you be comfortable if he testified under a full grant of immunity, including from governors, if that's possible? In other words, he said his side says he's worried about a state prosecution. Would you rather he never face any legal jeopardy for what he says, including if he perjured himself, to just let him testify?
The problem with giving someone immunity to lie is they may well just come and lie to you. You can't get rid of the idea that it's wrong to lie. If you get rid of that, then the testimony is absolutely worthless. You have to have some repercussion for lying. But the other side of the coin is all he has to do is tell the truth. In fact, he can come forward and he can say, yes, I deleted thousands of emails, I destroyed government records, but he could make some kind of rationalization, say, I didn't think they were government records, or I didn't know an email was a government records, and I'm sorry, but I've been pardoned for that. You can't do anything to me. He could say about gain of function what he's always been saying. He didn't think it was gain of function. Yeah. And I think it's disingenuous, and I think in many ways not honest, but he could have done all of those things and testify. And he chose not to. I mean, he chose to plead the fifth 111 times. And all he had to do was tell the truth. He didn't even have to say he didn't commit crimes, tell the truth that he actually did destroy records, but he doesn't have liability for that.
Yeah. I tell people all the time when I talk to them about your hearings and about you on this topic, there are two things that are true that aren't always true of members of Congress doing investigations.
And we have 4 states' attorneys generals looking into further charges against him. That includes the Florida AG, James Utmeyer, who said nothing is off the table. And we're talking about fraud, deceptive practices, misleading the public. There are a number of things that the attorney general there and others, such as in Louisiana, Alabama, and West Virginia, that they can bring forward against Fauci. So keep the dream alive. Public accountability. It needs to happen if this is going to restore any trust, not just in the government, but in the scientific community. So weigh in with your own thoughts. We always appreciate hearing from you at the Becker Brief.